All right, are we ready to go?
Let's go team.
Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to Coats and Jackets, and I'm here with Kimberly.
And this is Mandy.
And we're doing Wizarding World Book Club.
Okay, perfect. So last week we did friendship, and this week it's heroes and villains. So we want to go over the Twitter questions from last week of friendship. The first one was...
Hermione says that friendship and bravery are more important than books and cleverness. Do you agree?
Well, bravery gets you so far. You do need to know
You need to
some
have
information.
a good mix, but I think she's saying in the end, friendship and bravery will win out as the driving forces rather than books and cleverness, because what are you going to do with all that cleverness? Like, if you never use it for anything, what's the point of having it?
But she says that in reference to Harry and their friendship, and
she says it at the end too, when they're starting to engage in that final battle for Hogwarts in the first book.
And so I feel like this is more of a good example of how their relationship works, friendship-wise. She's the brain, but Harry really brings that bravery to the relationship.
He spurs them forward. Obviously, they're all brave because they're all in Gryffindor.
Oh, of course.
But I don't think they realize their potential for how brave they can be if they didn't have Harry as a driving force.
That's true. They don't know how brave they can be until they're put into that situation. And I do think that, for sure, but it's such a great line for Hermione to say.
Well, because it's so indicative of her character and how she's changing. And really how she's becoming a hero.
It's true. Like, she's always been book smart, but I really think that she's really at the beginning of her becoming braver and more
intuitive and savvy.
For sure. The next question was, is Harry always a good friend in the Philosopher's Stone? And I think that we already established that no, he is not always a good friend.
In addition to not really taking the opportunity to be as good a friend to Neville as he could have been, he sort of takes advantage of Hagrid.
It's true.
He constantly puts him in situations where he knows how to get Hagrid to talk, and he uses that to his own advantage to learn information.
That's right. He tricks Hagrid into telling him more information about Fluffy. Is this a good sense of, is this a good way to be a good friend? I mean, no. I mean, technically, I don't know if Harry is always a good friend, but he's
never malicious.
I was going to say, it comes from a good place. He does it with the idea of the better good.
Yes, of serving the greater good.
The better good, the greater good.
And while he was willing to cover up the dragon for Hagrid, and even once, everything had gone down, he still wouldn't betray Hagrid's secret that there was a dragon, not even to tell Neville to make that relationship better. Just in case it get out that Hagrid actually had a dragon.
That's true. So, I'm not saying that he's not a good friend, but he definitely has moments where
he maybe hasn't quite made the best choices.
That's right. The third question last week was, which friend has shown the most loyalty to Harry so far? And this is kind of hard because I feel like Hagrid is like nonstop 100% always on Harry's side.
Yeah. But he also does try to deter him from when he feels like his end goal is, and that's finding out about how the Philosopher's Stone is protected.
So, I mean, overall, I think that we agree that it would probably be Ron.
Yeah, and I think Hagrid would run a really close second.
Ron has, from the moment that he met Harry, kind of been by his side, has been his, I don't like to use the word sidekick, but like the peanut butter to his jelly.
Really not so much a sidekick as his other half.
Yeah, exactly. He's been by Harry's side this whole time, backs him up, kind of.
He's instantly his second.
Instantly his second in that wizarding duel, didn't even hesitate.
He's like, obviously we're going down the trap door with you.
Yeah, so I think that probably Ron. Like, he doesn't seem to hesitate, which doesn't surprise me because Ron is the heart of, I feel like, this group. He wears his heart on his sleeve. and he is willing to do whatever it takes for his friends.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For heroes and villains, there are some questions. So I think the most important one would be like, what makes a hero versus what makes a villain?
And this is super important in terms of our characters and what we've been talking about so far in terms of education. So like home environment and learned education versus academic education, but also some of the things we talked about when we were doing first impressions. Everything is choice and the choices you make. And no matter what's prophesized or what you think is going to happen or what your first impressions are, ultimately it comes down to the type of decisions you're going to make. And nothing is more obvious than with these characters.
Yes. Harry and Malfoy. Malfoy is probably our first, well, other than the Dursleys, but we're not going to talk about the Dursleys. We know that they're kind of villainous in their own way. But in the wizarding world, the first villain really that Harry comes across is Draco Malfoy. And on the train to Hogwarts, Draco finds Harry and Ron in the compartment together. And he just basically says, you know, you'll soon find out that some wizarding families aren't as good as other wizarding families. Yeah. Don't go making friends with the wrong sort. And I can help you out there. Like, come be my friend and be my companion because, you know,
and
you're Harry Potter.
I'll teach you who's in all the upper circles.
Because Draco's a bit of a bigot, is a good word here. So Draco is, he believes in pure blood wizarding families. He doesn't want muggles in Hogwarts. He doesn't want humans. He thinks that they're dirty. He wants it to be all wizards all the time. And Harry comes from a wizarding family. Now,
that being said, Harry's wizarding family, his mother was Muggle-born, but people don't know that. Mostly because the Potters were a very powerful family and were well known and well liked and respected. And Harry being the only one to survive that attack, it's thought he must have inherently, especially since he was a baby, literally an infant, it was thought that he must have inherently had some kind of special magical ability in order for Voldemort not to be able to kill him.
So it's thought that already from the very beginning, Harry is a very powerful, very strong wizard. But Draco, very early in the books, establishes himself. He makes snide comments, he's rude, he's cheats, he lies. He's overall just not a very, very nice person. And he does not have the best interest of others in mind. He has his best interest in mind. And I think that's really what defines a villain. They
think of themselves and what they can achieve first and everybody else second.
That's true. It's always me, 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 me. And I don't care who gets hurt on the way. And whatever I have to do to make that happen. Harry and Draco have very similar backgrounds. Harry very easily could have been very much like Draco. We've already discussed that before. But the thing about Harry is he's always thinking about others. Every situation that he gets into, it's because he's trying to help people.
Yeah, and he doesn't always make the most correct choices, and we've said again, he's very rash, but at least he has others' best interest at heart.
He's always thinking about, it's never about himself, he's always doing things in a way to prevent other people from getting in trouble, or to prevent Voldemort from eventually...
And he does try to tell teachers. This is a point near the end of the book now where we do see him try to tell the teachers, and they just don't believe there's any way you could get in that he's actually 100% back, but they know there's some kind of inkling because Dumbledore knows.
Yes.
But he's keeping that very close with only a select group of teachers.
And the problem is that Harry is not quite sure which teachers to trust. He thinks that Snape is helping Voldemort. He thinks that Snape was the one who is trying to curse him.
Yes.
Or hex him when he was on the Quidditch field. He thinks that he tried to get
past Fluffy.
He
thinks he was the hooded figure that gave Hagrid the dragon egg. And he saw a few different instances where Snape was speaking with Quirrell, and that led Harry to believe that the final test, like, that Snape was in on, knew that one of the traps must have been set by Quirrell because he was Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. And that was maybe the only thing he hadn't figured out how to get past, because he knows he'd been to see Fluffy because he'd gotten a bite.
So, I mean, Snape comes off as a villain.
He's very as we said, first impressions, very mean-spirited, seems to, like the rest of Slytherin, embody the worst qualities of that house.
And it isn't until later in the book that we actually discover that Snape is what I would consider a misunderstood hero. He doesn't, or like an unlikely hero. He is not making his heroic deeds known. No one else knows that he is trying to stop. He suspects Quirrell is trying
to get the stone. He's not 100% certain for what reasons, but he suspects he's up to something. And the first thing that tips him off is actually the troll. Because where Quirrell had traveled the world, he knows that as part of his dark arts training, Defense Against Dark Arts training, that he knows particularly a lot about mountain trolls and how they work and how to control them and tame them with magic. They're not known for being intelligent creatures. They don't rationalize on their own. A lot of what they do is random. And so you have to be able to control those creatures with magic in order to keep them away from populated areas.
And how does a troll just wander into Hogwarts?
Which is a highly protected school. There's a moat.
There's literally a lake.
It could have been in the forest somewhere, but there's so many enchantments for the protection of the students that it's unlikely a troll would have randomly wandered out of the forest.
So, I mean, Snape is triggered that there might be something on the go, and he goes to stop Quirrell from getting into the Fluffy.
Yes.
And which is how he got the bite. But of course, this is when Harry sees him and thinks that now Snape is his main adversary.
He does. And it doesn't help that, again, Snape, in a misguided attempt to keep Harry humble and make sure he didn't make the same mistakes he'd seen other students make, that he comes off as so mean and so against Harry in particular that it only reaffirms Harry's idea that this is a villain.
Well, and it doesn't help that Snape hates Harry's father, but that's something that will come along later.
Yeah, in later books we're going to get into his entire past. But suffice to say, Snape has a very similar background to both Harry and Draco as well.
He, as a student, was very misunderstood as well. He was very, I would say, not one of the popular kids. And I think that Snape does what he needs to do for the greater good in this book. He just goes about it the wrong way.
Like Harry, Hogwarts was the first place he considered a home. And so he's doing whatever he can to protect Hogwarts. But again, it seems very much like he's just doing everything against them, from refereeing the match to uttering spells while Harry is being thrown around on his broom, which we briefly touched on. But that turns out to be a counter spell to try to keep Harry on his broom.
And he decided to referee the match in order to keep whoever was trying to knock Harry out of the broom, keep Harry safe. And so it's not until later, I mean, the whole book, Snape is vilified, and it's not until later we realize that he's actually...
Everything he'd done, what was foreshadowing what seemed like a villain was actually a hero.
He was actually working behind the scenes to try and keep Harry safe and to try and save the school. And so I'm not sure if Harry really ever acknowledges or feels bad about this fact, but he really vilified Snape far too much.
And by the end of it, you can see he's slightly regretful because Hagrid says to him, I told you it would have never in a million years been Snape. He wouldn't have been the one to do it. Now, Hagrid has background knowledge, having gone through Hogwarts with Snape, that Harry doesn't have. So, obviously, he knows him better than Harry would.
It's true. The Mirror of Erised.
when we first get introduced to the mirror, it's earlier on in the book. And we could have fit this into the theme of education because there is a little bit there that has to do with that. But we felt like it fit in this section way more because it reveals a lot about the difference between a hero and a villain.
Oh, for sure. When a hero looks into the mirror, they see themselves as a better person, surrounded by loved ones, achieving greatness in school, or just, as Dumbledore says, with a great pair of thick wool socks. They...
And we'll get into maybe what Dumbledore sees in the mirror much more later, because it's probably not a pair of thick wool socks.
It's probably not a pair of thick wool socks. But they see themselves just becoming a better person or achieving things, I guess, emotionally fulfilling.
Yes, and that's a main point about the mirror. The mirror itself... it says, and this was really cool. This was something I didn't realize as a kid, that I didn't realize until I was rereading the book. And it's not like I've never reread the book since then, but it took until just now when I was rereading this book to get it, and I can't believe it took so long. The title of the mirror and the writing that Harry reads on it is actually in reverse because it's a mirror. And it says, I show not your face, but your heart's desire. And that's why it's the mirror of Erised, because it's desire backwards, which is the end of that saying. So when you're looking in the mirror, it's showing your truest want, your truest need. And that goes to what you were saying, because the good people are going to want to do better, to be better versions of themselves.
I read the book as well as an adult, and I did not pick up on that.
I did not get that until just now.
I was like,
is this just like crazy magic writing? And it took me like a second. I was like, no, it's backwards. It's obviously backwards.
I just assumed that it was just some sort of...
I felt so dumb that I hadn't noticed it before, like, reading it for the book club.
It's just like, is this some sort of Tolkien Elvish language? Of course. Of course it's written backwards. Alright. Now I just feel silly. So the deepest, darkest desire. So, I mean, a hero wants the better good, innately. And I think that a villain innately wants,
something to make them more powerful.
So they seek power and
they seek glory rather than a betterment of themselves.
That's true.
When Ron sees the reflection, yes, he's getting a glory that he's never had before, and part of him does want that. But like when he sees himself holding the Quidditch cup and he's still surrounded by friends and family, and they're cheering for him, and it's about him getting his moment in the sun, but also about the fact that he's now achieved these things that he wants to for himself.
Well, and achieving all those things that all of his siblings have done before him.
Yes.
And so, he's going to be the head boy, and he's going to win the Quidditch Cup, and he's going to be captain of the Quidditch team. These are all things that his older siblings
have already accomplished.
And I think that being the youngest boy of the Weasley family, he feels some pressure to achieve greatness as well.
Yeah, at least the same as them. And live up to his family's reputation that way.
So I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that when you're a villain, it's more about you're going to get whatever you want, and you don't care.
Well, you don't care who's surrounding you either. Ron's surrounded by friends and family when he achieves these things.
Exactly. Villains are happy to be seen standing alone, surrounded by gold and
whatever other fortunes it is they wanted.
And there is a quote that I really like, said by Michael Caine in The Dark Knight, Batman movie. Some men just like to watch the world burn. And whenever I think about the Mirror of Erised, and I think about what Voldemort would see in there,
he would just see everything burning at his feet.
Exactly. That's what I picture. I picture him standing there on the top of, whatever bodies he had to get to. Because, I mean, actually steals souls, or he shares a soul and shares a body.
He will steal whatever life he needs, and this brings us back to the unicorn as well, because to drink unicorn blood will prolong your life, but it's a thing that is...
It's a cursed life, a half-life.
It has to be bestowed upon you by a dying unicorn. You can't just take its blood. And it results in a cursed life. And it will be a very twisted, not even as long a life, a half-life, a short life. It merely prolongs it. And because he does this while he's in Quirrell's body, because at this point we've realized the garlic smell and the timidness, it was all because he was hiding Voldemort in the turban.
And which brings us to kind of back to Quirrell as well. Quirrell is, in his own way, I mean, he's a cowardly villain. He ends up being, I guess, swayed over or tricked, or he becomes Voldemort's host.
And he does so because in his quest to prove himself traveling the world, he had always felt like he was picked upon for being very timid and not taken as seriously as he felt he should have been. So part of him was questing for power as well, to prove he was better, that he was greater. And it wasn't just about bettering himself. And that's why it was so easy for Voldemort to latch on to him, because he thought, well, I've come across a part of the Dark Lord's soul. And I know he's a terrible guy, but I think he was a bit arrogant and thought, well, he's so weak, I could control it and make myself more powerful.
Exactly.
And the opposite happened.
So again, same thing. A quest for power turned wrong, really. It's what makes Quirrell the villain. And he tries to harm Harry while playing Quidditch. Has a hex on him. And, you know, throughout the entire book, you feel really bad for Quirrell. He stutters, and then all of a sudden the stutter is gone. He stands up straight, he's very, strong,
but this is when
powerful.
He's fully accepted Voldemort, because as we learn throughout the book, he's been trying to fight him still, because he knows that ultimately what he wants is wrong. And we overhear an argument in a classroom that Harry thinks is between Snape and Quirrell, because it's hushed voices, but really it's between Voldemort, who's now occupying his face on the back of his head, and Quirrell. And they're actually fighting because Quirrell doesn't want to harm the students.
So, I mean, I think that, I don't know, the same thing, like, what will Quirrell see? Well, we know what Quirrell sees. He sees himself standing in the mirror.
And he sees he's gotten the stone. He's pleasing his master. He's presenting it to Voldemort.
Surrounded by gold, presenting it to Voldemort. Which, the mirror was genius, really.
It was.
That you could never have the stone if you wanted to use it.
And that was the best way to ensure it didn't end up in the wrong hands. Because the mirror knows your desire, it knows your intent. And so if you wanted the stone in order to protect it, in order to keep it from people, to stop anyone from using it with no thought in your own mind to use it yourself, you would get it. And no villain would look at the stone and look in that mirror and want to get that stone and not think about using it.
Exactly. So, I mean, truly genius on Dumbledore's part. I mean, the only one who could get that stone out of that mirror in that room
would have been Dumbledore or Harry.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, I'm not saying that it couldn't have been other teachers or something like that, but in that room at that time, Quirrell wasn't going to get that stone. Voldemort wasn't going to get that stone. I mean, really, if Harry had not gone in there, Dumbledore probably would have come back and found Quirrell and Voldemort still there.
Yes, trying to figure out how to get it out of the mirror. But the thing is, Dumbledore knew that Harry was going to go down there. We know he knew. And we know he let him see the mirror for a certain period of time before he got, obsessed with seeing his family in it. Because he wanted him to know about the mirror, and he wanted him to know how the mirror worked. Because he knew if anybody had to get the stone, if there was an emergency, he wanted Harry to be able to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Get that out of the way first, right? Yeah.